I'm excited to have been given this opportunity to have my voice be heard by you great people. And I just have to say how I love California. I've always loved California, and whenever I cross your borders, it's like a childlike anticipation. And I have to say, it's not just because of the theme parks, but because of the beauty here. The smell of the coast is one of my favorite things, even the humidity. I love experiencing that humidity because I'm so used to the dry Arizona country. The many cultures, the rolling hills, it's just a beautiful, beautiful country that's here. And the last few years, I've actually got to see more of California, northern, central, southern, as some of my liberty-loving friends have welcomed me into their home. And one of them actually is here, Debbie. She took me and I got to tour her family's ranch and just got to see their strong heritage there. And I got to experience the joy that these different loving liberty friends have in their heritage and in their property ownership. And those experiences will be very near and dear to me in their willingness to be vulnerable with me and let me into their inner circle in that way. I'm also very energized when I come and I am surrounded with wonderful people who are good-hearted and just love liberty, and that is their true intent. And so for that, I have gratitude swell within me to be here today. California will be great because of you, this grassroots network that is working to preserve and protect freedom and liberty in your communities. For this event, I was preparing, and here's the clicker. Okay, I was preparing and practicing what you might call an emote enactment of what I methodically picked out segments of my father's recordings. And coincidentally, just a few days ago, Center for Self-Governance presented my family what I'm going to show you guys, and it is called Lavoie Dead Man Talking Trailer Number 2. The segments used in this trailer are the exact segments that I had methodically picked out to do that emote enactment, which confirmation to me was these are the segments that need to be heard. And so before I show this trailer to you, I want to just take a quick moment and express my gratitude for Center for Self-Governance for being true to form, true to their mission, which is to be a selfless organization that will mentor citizens in learning to practice their civic authority to hold governors accountable when they have become out of control. And we are honored to work with them. We are actually doing a 3-part documentary series. The first one kind of showcases the Bundy standoff, and then the others will be showcasing Harney County. And we want to tell the true story, but in a way that is professional, that will continue to shock the conscience into putting a fire under the seat of the millennials to get involved in applied civics. And I just have to say, Aaron, you are doing a fantastic job of raising this rising generation. Applause to you. I hope that I can fill your shoes. I hope that my 4 boys will be sons of liberty, and I have a great work to see that come to pass. And so I'm so pleased to see your son here. I just want to come give you a big hug, and more than just a handshake. But our goal and mission and intent is to get people understanding the truth, because there was propaganda and lies, and to get people actively engaged in civic activities. So here is the trailer.
Hello everyone, this is Lloyd Finicum. It's September 2014. I'm out here on my ranch. Great up here.
You know, I've never been one to
in trouble in school. I always raised my hand. I always stood in line. To this day, I do not have a speeding ticket. But it doesn't take too much to see that large voting files are gathered.
Here is a non-local trespass, fee of $92 and change, $180, $1,185 and change.
It's not there. I didn't buy it from them.
This tank here has been sabotaged.
The OM came in here, set up a tank, they drained it, they stole it.
We have been classified as domestic terrorists. These are real lives. These are real people. They want to pull everybody's crazy right. Everyone will lose their jobs here.
Look what they're doing over to that family, the Hammond family. They threw them in jail, tremendous amount of fines.
This isn't America. This isn't what we are. No matter how long or short my days may be, I am going to live as a free man. I promise you this, I will not back down. I will not capitulate. I will die before I sleep well at night. We all only have one life. Maybe we'll get a chance to look each other in the eye.
This is not a light thing that I'm doing, but I counted the cost, and I'm willing to pay.
Now, there is no emote reenactment that could have portrayed my dad's words better than him saying it himself. 2 years ago, just a few months after my father's murder, I attended what I just learned was the first symposium of Protect the Harvest and the Range Rights Resource Symposium. And Kathy Smith invited me to go, and I was grateful to have that opportunity. She has become a near and dear friend to our family. And I was grateful as I was in the audience to be sitting next to her, being able to feel her calming influence and her love and patience as I was often lean over and express to her what I felt like was exploding emotions and impressions that I would constantly have throughout the entire symposium. I remember the conversation I had with my dad when he first crossed paths with the Smith family. It was shortly after he published his novel, Only by Blood and Suffering, Regaining of Lost Freedom. About a year before he found himself in Oregon, I would call Dad weekly to get reports on how his book campaigning was going, and he excitedly told me how he had this super long conversation with Bert Smith randomly in the parking lot, and how he was willing to have my dad's book inside their store, Smith & Edwards, and he just expressed his deep gratitude for the opportunity that the Lord provided for his path to cross with such a loving Liberty family. Back to the event 2 years ago, the emotions in the room, anybody who was there that day, I see some familiar faces from our last event there, knows that the emotions in the room were very raw. The sting of death was fresh, for a God-fearing, law-abiding rancher had just been murdered by unruly American agents while his hands were up in surrender in the universal sign of surrender. Protect the Harvest's objective was and is to protect, preserve, and perpetuate life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of the American people. And some in attendance that day 2 years ago who addressed the audience had very different ideas about political boundaries and how the preservation is to be done. A pragmatic approach was the intent in organizing a mixed ideologies to address the audience. And I admit now I was uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable to admit how my grief at that time compelled me to leave the room several times because I was literally sick to my stomach and in tears. I assert that this physical response was not simply the result of bigotry on my part or a lack of ambiguity. At that moment in time, all the summers with Dad bucking hay, digging ditches, fixing fence, hauling water, rodeoing, even my cultural development, the classes I've taken, the books I studied, the late night conversations with Dad about principles of freedom, all of those things that made me the well-rounded, tough-as-nails American girl that I knew myself to be was in vain at that moment, for grief consumed me. I simply could not sit and listen to the rhetoric of young bureaucratic agents preaching philosophies that my late father so strongly yet kindly opposed. It felt disloyal, and I was literally physically ill. So I walked out. I was wearing my stiletto heels and my skinny jeans, and I walked out, and I sat in the lobby with tear-filled eyes and rage in my heart. Yet, desiring deeply for grit to continue the fight to stand, firm for truth, and courage to forgive. I wanted charity. I knew then, just as much as I know now, how one is not exempt from the possibility of becoming a contributing force to that which robs liberty. We all, every single one of us, has the potential of becoming the very thing we say we oppose, if enmity is allowed to be rooted in the heart. Pride, ego, haughtiness, speaking ill of, guile, anger, hatred, all the above will prove an unprofitable laborer for good. For now, I'll call this unprofitable laborer a goon, if you want to add a little satire. This wrestle is real and raw and requires meekness when life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and property is violated. I say meekness because many of you know the initial knee-jerk reaction is to bonk them on the head and poke them in the eye, rather than practice the attribute of meekness of strong self-restraint. We all know the good fairy turns little bunny foo-foo into a goon after consistently scooping up the field mice and bonking him on the head. I don't want to be a goon. As I sat there alone pondering these things, seeking quiet comfort, others from the audience began to congregate in the lobby with me. We held each other. We cried. We even rubbed doTERRA balanced essential oils on our hands for aromatherapy, and tried not to speak ill of speakers that were promoting a continuation of obfuscated political boundaries. Now, this obfuscation is no light matter. We must realize, to ensure the integrity of our constitutional republic, that these invisible geographic political boundaries require civic maintenance to ward off the governed and governors falling victim to human nature, which is for the governed to just be complacent and comply with lawlessness, to roll over and just be. And for the governors to practice demagogic methods to blur boundaries, to expand control, all at the expense of freedom and liberty. To be successful at this maintenance, a citizenry must be educated on the Constitution, educated on freedom, on liberty, what these things are. They must know their systems of government, both federal and state, and then build a community that mutually pledges to learn the system while developing refined diplomacy so to enable a successful effort at leveraging what might feel like, and I'm sure you can relate to this, what might feel like undesirable relationships to bring about a means to an end. A good friend of mine, Mark Herr, who is the co-founder and president of Center for Self-Governance, summed it up by saying, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, learn the system. 2, build a community. 3, troubleshoot and fix. When I hear that, I just take a breath of fresh air, because that sounds doable to me. I love the solution language rather than solely discussing the gross overreach. It has been my observation that too many get lost in dark, time-wasting, mind-numbing political rabbit holes. Back to little bunny foo-foo. I quote Dad when I say, it's time we start doing more than just talk. It's interesting to note how Idaho State Constitution states, quote, the stability of the republic depends on the intelligence of the people, end quote. Thomas Jefferson commented on the natural state of man in saying, quote, the qualifications for self-government in society are not innate. They are the result of habit and long training, end quote. Jefferson understood it was natural for the governed to roll over and comply with lawlessness and suffer it as long as it is sufferable. And he also understood how the governor's practice is to use demagogic methods to expand their control. And that a successful maintenance of this delicate system requires this habit and long training. You may say it is part of our lifestyle, our culture. Perhaps this is why our beloved George Washington said in his first inaugural address, quote, the smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order, which heaven itself has ordained, and since the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the Republican model of government are justly considered as deeply, perhaps as finely stacked in the hands of the American people. Dad's murder cut to the core, and many in attendance that day 2 years ago literally were squirming in their seats, wondering if the ranchers in the room were going to take courage and follow suit to the current coalition, which aim was to maintain their invisible geographic political boundaries. The unspoken question in everyone's mind was, were more American ranchers going to draw their hard line in the sand with respect to bureaucratic overreach? Who might stand as Dad had and say, quote, no, I will not comply with your lawlessness. I will not capitulate. I will not sign your alleged mandatory terms and conditions. From this day forward, I take full responsibility for my ranch, and I shall no longer need your assistance in the management of my property. Please know, this is not me trying to be an anarchist. On the contrary, I believe in government. We need the federal government. I love the federal government in its proper place. How else are we to maintain our borders and keep our country safe from those who wish our country ill intent? How else are we to keep commerce regular amongst the states? And then there's just a few other narrowly defined aspects that we need the federal government for. End quote. I remember asking one of the speakers after they finished competently reporting on to the congregation about years of abuse suffered as byproduct of bureaucratic overreach. I asked over the microphone, how many more lives must be destroyed before we decide a separation from the Bureau of Land Management is necessary? I went on to say, is that not what the Bundy family, my father, and others who had recently canceled their contracts with the Bureau of Land Management were doing? They were peaceably separating themselves from a long train of abuses and usurpations. You might even say absolute despotism. They were peacefully dissolving the political band which connected them to this bureaucracy. The response to my question was interesting. There was a noticeably uncomfortable pause. All could tell that great thought was at play, considering how to respond to the daughter of a man who was just murdered at the hands of out-of-control agents, which everyone knew was the byproduct of a long train of bureaucratic overreach. Political boundaries being blurred and breached by what my father called the federal ruler that set itself up as an empire in these United States. The speaker confidently replied, all measures must be taken before revolution. At that point, it sank very, very deep. How the media truly was successful at delivering their desired narrative, that these men in Oregon were anarchists, anti-government terrorists. For if who I considered to be a fellow sufferer believed the intent of the occupiers and their conduct to be revolutionary, then the media indeed was successful. The intent of my father's participation in the Oregon occupation never was revolutionary. The intent was to maintain political boundaries that had been obfuscated for far too long. The backbone of his stand was, many of you may know, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of our United States Constitution. For some, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 may not be concise enough on the topic of lawful federal land ownership, leaving an unyielding desire to redline the genealogy of Congress's adjudication on Western land issues. And for that, I will refer any such person to Dr. Angus McIntosh, who you'll get to hear tomorrow. His written dissertation on property rights on Western ranches, federal rangeland policy, for you or whoever to begin your study. In reading his dissertation, one will be provided with references to all pertaining acts of Congress. And just for fun, I'll give you a few little teasers. 1, grazing fees are grossly misunderstood. 2, Congress actually has over the years adjudicated in favor of property rights of the individual American. And 3, which is the most disturbing, it is because we do not study that we are taken advantage of by tactics of intimidation and trickery. The mentality has been, for quite some time, get them to sign something they don't understand, and then we've got them. Now, whether the response to my very difficult question that day 2 years ago was to imply that my father's conduct was revolutionary or not, I don't know. I did not ask probing questions, and I don't want to come across as though I am assuming or suggesting what the response's intent was. I only respond to the statement. If choosing to redline and negotiate the conditions of contracts before signing, or simply deciding to opt out of signing altogether, So to transition from recognizing the federal overlord bureaucracy to recognizing the county as the closest form of government was revolutionary, let's be very clear. It would not and was not the cowboys' conduct that was revolutionary. Let's remember and never forget who it was that was pointing guns at who at the Bundy standoff, and who it was that was pointing guns at who at the Oregon occupation. Let us also be clear that no form of barbarous intimidation would cause these particular American cowboys to roll over and give up. I think we saw that. You can throw a man in solitary confinement for 4 months straight, and he still held to his guns. Their conviction to protect their life, their liberty, pursuit of happiness and property, using the rule of law as their guide, was impenetrable. I have often lamented, when I'm in the woe is me mentality, that if such heart existed in even a fraction of the American people, the many abuses of political control that has taken place would not exist. This is no work for the faint of heart. I quote scripture when I say, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of the world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." And I know this and testify that this is true. I paraphrase the BLM whistleblower, who is now one of my newest heroes, mind you, Larry Wooten, who had lead investigator, who was assessed how federal officers handled the 2014 arms standoff with far-reaching misconduct, recklessness, and unrestrained apathy toward the family. Wooten asserted there was a widespread pattern of bad judgment, lack of discipline, incredible bias, unprofessionalism, and misconduct, as well as likely policy, ethical, and legal violations among senior and supervisory staff at the Bureau of Land Management, Office of Law Enforcement and Security. Wooten wrote that supervisory agents with the Bureau repeatedly mocked the defendants and manifested religious bigotry. I am almost certain, and it's not too far-fetched, that gems like the whistleblower in the Nevada case will come out in our Finicum wrongful death lawsuit. It's not too far-fetched to assume that the same disposition that was at play at Bunkerville was also at play at the Oregon occupation. Not only is the Bureau's very existence a gross violation of our constitutional republic, but its administrative agents carry with them enmity, pride, ego, haughtiness, contempt, speaking ill of, guile, anger, and hatred towards the American people. This destructive disposition, coupled with their lawlessness, is a putrid insult and embarrassment to the American way. I quote Neil Wampler, who was one of the Oregon occupation defendants, acquitted, who said, while interviewing for the documentary that we're working on with Center for Self-Governance, he says, "The people's petition for a redress of grievance," and then he looks into the camera and screams into the microphone, "was answered in the form of bullets." As you see in the picture, Trent Luce, who has also become a very good friend to our family, was there holding the microphone that day as I boldly asked this difficult question. He got to see the fire in my eyes and feel the energy reverberate from me as my flesh trembled. I have pondered often my experience there that day and many others that I have had over the past 24 months, and always find gratitude swell deep within me for all of the individuals who press forward, seeking to find a solution and to be part of the solution. This transition from federal overlord to the states claiming their rightful spot and duty will take every single one of us, every single individual, sharing their unique talents and understanding of the Constitution, understanding of what freedom and liberty is. When people lift where they stand to assert their civic authority, to maintain political boundaries, to ensure the integrity of our constitutional republic is intact, great things happen. As my father once said, when politicians and the courts don't maintain these boundaries, it is up to who? It is up to the individual American to stand. This is so much more than just about cows, lumber, or alleged endangered species, and the presenters have done really well today to convey that message. This is about preserving the life, liberty, pursuit of happiness of the American people. Ironically and lamentably so, it's very easy to lose life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and property, and very difficult to maintain them. Before Dad's murder, a positive butterfly effect in Oregon, in the Oregon petition, was indeed taking place. Local citizens were rising above fear and forming a coalition. Those in office across several western states were forced to start conversations, of which I got to listen in on some of them. No more could the suffering of the American people at the hand of rogue bureaucratic agents be swept under the rug. This was good news. While at the Harney County, Dad expressed, quote, "I promise you, Harney County, at the moment there is no longer just one rancher, just one, saying they want us here, then I must go, because then if I was to stay, I would be like the federal government. I am here for your good. I am going to help you whether you like it or not. That is not why we are here. They have asked us to come help, but that is not being portrayed. What we are hoping and what is happening there is our ranchers are saying, thank you for being here. Help us get this down and we will take it over and then we will do it. At that moment we will exhale, say thank you, pass the baton, and go home. But we promise you, Harney County, you ranchers, you loggers, farmers, you citizens that want to be free from the federal overlord, that any moment, once the baton is passed, that if the federal government once again tries to re-exert their force over you and your ranch and over your water rights, we shall return and stand between you and them. We will leave, but with the explicit understanding that we will not abandon you if they come back to re-exert control over you. It is about the one, and it is a whole lot more than one here. And I think Aaron's presentation really explained that. We do not live in a democracy, he said. We live in a republic, wherein the rights of the individual are protected against the tyranny of the majority. A democracy, the simplest form of a democracy, is two wolves and a lamb sitting down at the table to decide what's for dinner. End quote. My dad understood what the wise Benjamin Franklin meant when he commented, "We must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately." Dad meant what he said. He was not going to capitulate. He was not going to bow down to false gods, and he would stand to defend the one. Corrupt tactics of intimidation did not sway his step, for he was a man of God and courage, and he worked for liberty. The contending force at play in this chess game could see this, and they could see the fruits of education and what support can do. At which point it was decided what one individual in office, Senator Ron Wyden, I'll say, called the virus, had to be swiftly stopped. And just a few days after such public remarks, Dad was murdered. Did you know that before Dad was murdered, there were what I believe to be 5 ranchers in 5 different states, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Oregon, ironically, canceling their contracts with the Bureau of Land Management and taking necessary steps to recognize their county as the closest form of government. So, what did this federal top brass do? What was their chess move in this sick game? We all know the answer to that question. The chess move was an orchestration of an illegal premeditated ambush with the intent to kill. And they did. They killed my dad. Not long after Dad's murder, an AP, Associated Press wire from Portland, Oregon said, quote, "Officials investigating the death of Robert Lavoy Finicum are ready to release results of the fatal shooting during the January 26th traffic stop while trying to arrest the rancher and others involved in the takeover of an Oregon wildlife refuge." End quote. I declare the FBI's video shows that it was not a traffic stop. It was an ambush involving a roadblock on a blind curve. I've been there, I've walked the street. Along a lone stretch of highway, a dead man's blockade, a kill stop, which is illegal. The Associated Press continues, "The FBI said Finicum was shot after reaching for a gun." End quote. The Finicum family will forever reject that statement. The FBI's aerial video was of poor quality, we believe to be edited, and provided no audio. Our family asserts that he was shot with both hands in the air, not reaching for an alleged gun that we believe was planted in his pocket upside down and backwards. He was walking with his hands in the air, a symbol of surrender. When he reached down, it was to the side where he had been shot. Bam, 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 all entering through the back and exiting through the front. I assert this was no routine traffic stop. It was a dead man's roadblock, which may only be used in special circumstances. Some may be asking what's the law's language defining these special circumstances. Policy reads, fleeing felons, when necessary, provided a description of the suspects and suspect vehicle is available, B, supervisory approval is obtained, C, an escape route is left available, and D, the suspect is wanting for the following: homicide, robbery in the first degree, rape, assault with the intent to kill, or felonious assault, or prison escape. The reasons for these policies is the U.S. Supreme Court, penned by the late Justice Scalia. The court ruled that the use of such a roadblock in similar situations as in the case of my dad, Lavoy Finicum, was seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And such a roadblock in and of itself was lethal use of force needing to be justified. My family's journey since that dreadful day, that snowy, dreadful day in Eastern Oregon when my father was murdered, has felt long and hard, and very tempting to just roll over and go back to being my yoga pants soccer mom. We are still grieving, and we will be grieving for a very long time. The Oregon defendant acquittals just 9 months after his murder was indeed a great and dreadful day for our family. Great because the men that my father stood with were free. But dreadful because had not American agents, oh, sorry, I should have showed that. There we go. But dreadful because had not American agents shot my father and left him bleeding out in the snow with no medical assistance, no warrant, no charges, no arraignment, no preliminary hearing, no indictment, no trial by jury, Dad, too, would have walked free, a living man, that great day. The pressing question now is, should those out-of-control agents just walk free? No. We will see that those players face prosecution, for Dad will have his day in court. It is not in our nature to roll over and give up. We will press forward, holding firm to truth. We understand that filing for a wrongful death lawsuit will not bring Dad home, but the process will uniquely contribute to the delicate journey of closure for each of the loved ones of Lavoie. Our motivation to continue this long, hard, and very expensive journey is, in a sense, to preserve the American dream by ensuring that agents who refuse to be governed by the confines of the law, who are delegated sacred controls within our governmental system, are held accountable. Being unaccountable to the law must not persist in this nation. The outcome of our case will have powerful butterfly effects upon this nation. If we do not insist upon accountability, this type of conduct will continue to take precedence in destroying many more Americans' life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It is not American to deny citizens the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and due process. And we are Americans. As I have said before, whether or not you believe he did the right thing, I now step forward and ask, who are we as Americans? Who are we as human beings? Do we now believe that mere words justify the use of deadly force? Do we believe that peaceful actions justify the use of deadly force? Do we believe that 2 hands up in surrender justifies the use of deadly force? And do we believe that following the rule of law, the United States Constitution, justifies the use of deadly force? If we do, then liberty is lost. Today, as when I first said this, many questions are left unanswered. And many questions are being asked. We don't want the media's bias. We don't want the FBI's bias. We want the truth. And this is why we're pressing forward with our wrongful death case. And we need your help. We are of the opinion that the greater amount of faithful individuals that are imploring the powers of heaven for truth to prevail during this case's litigation process, the greater miracle we will see come to pass, just like we saw in the most recent Oregon and Nevada cases. I invite you guys to write down our family website or go to your mobile device and do that now and sign up for our family newsletter. This will provide you with monthly updates on the progress of our wrongful death case. I also invite you, if you'd like, to come visit with me at the table here. We are featuring one of Dad's handwritten quotes that he taped to the wall. He would often just tape things to the wall and in his man cave and on the fridge. And he even had this little 3x5 card holder that he would carry in his console and in his vehicles. And he would just study the minds of other great Americans. And this is one that really inspired him and helped him remember what it was that he was standing for. And so we wanted to share a little piece of him in his own handwriting that you too, invite you too to tape it to your wall so that you can be reminded of him and what he stood for. The fight for freedom is God's fight. I love that, just that one sentence. So, to raise funds for our legal team, we are sharing this written quote. I declare, and may you also, pledge allegiance and responsibility to support, keep, and maintain pro-responsible government within the United States of America while maintaining healthy balance between family and church. May God bless this great effort and this great land that we call America. Thank you.